Welcome to today's forum. Today's question: if a black child can be chased, shot while running away, and the person who killed him can walk free, how many times does that have to happen before we admit the system is not treating those lives the same? And is that justice, or is that permission? In 2023, a 14-year-old black child named Cyrus Carmack Belton was accused of stealing water from a store in South Carolina, was chased by two grown men for over 100 yards, and was shot in the back while running away. Evidence later confirmed that he did not steal anything, and witnesses described him as trying to leave the situation when the shot was fired. In June of 2026, a jury found the man who shot him not guilty. Now that situation itself is enough to raise serious questions, but it does not exist by itself. In the United States, homicide is the leading cause of death for black youth between the ages of 10 and 24, and black Americans are killed at a rate more than 6 times higher than white Americans, while making up just a fraction of the population. That is the reality these conversations sit inside of. And when cases like this happen, when a black child is killed and the system finds a way to justify it, people are not reacting to one moment. They are reacting to a pattern of outcomes that keeps raising the same question over and over again. Because every time this happens, the message people hear is not just about one case, it's about what the system consistently chooses to excuse. So today we ask, if a black child can be chased, shot while running away, and the person who killed him can walk free, how many times does that have to happen before we admit the system is not treating those lives the same? And if the system keeps producing the same outcome over and over again, is that justice, or is that permission?
The law in this country has never been blind. It has always been a mirror. And for 400 years, that mirror has reflected one truth: black life is negotiable and black death is explainable. Every time the state kills one of us unarmed, the explanation arrives faster than the ambulance. Because the ritual isn't about truth, it's about justifying the unjustifiable. That is not justice. That is a ritual this nation performs with the same script every time. According to the Washington Post Police Violence Database, since 2015, police in this country have killed over 1,000 people every single year. That's not a spike, that's a routine. And in that routine, black people, 13% of the population, are consistently over 25% of the unarmed dead. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern written in blood, and the state has the audacity to call it reasonable fear. Fear that aligns with race every single time. And don't you dare pretend this is modern. This is an American tradition. In 1895, Lizzie Durr, 13 years old, shot in the back while running away. In 1938, Barry Lawson, beaten to death in custody. In 1943, Robert Hall, killed while handcuffed. In 1963, Charles Mack Parker, lynched while the sheriff looked away. And in 2014, Tamir Rice, 12 years old, shot within 2 seconds of police arrival. Different uniforms, same verdict, same justification, same script. The badge changed, the logic didn't. And now they want to tell me a grown man can chase a child, chase him, and still claim self-defense. Self-defense requires immediacy and necessity, not imagination and pursuit. But somehow the law must bow to a man's fantasy while a child's body lies in the street. No, that is doctrine, a doctrine rehearsed since slave patrols wrote the first black policing manuals. Self-defense was never meant to be a hunter's alibi. It was never meant to follow a fleeing body. But that is exactly what it has become. A shield for aggression, a loophole for violence, a legal garment tailored to fit the shooter before the shot is even fired. A verdict pre-cleared by precedent, rehearsed through decades of rulings that always bend the same direction. And every time the verdict comes back clean, the system nods and says, yes, this is how it is supposed to work. Any law that lets a pursuer claim self-defense is not protecting life, it is protecting authority. Any doctrine that keeps producing unarmed black bodies and armed white explanations is not broken, it is functioning exactly as intended. And until that intent is ripped out of the law, we will keep adding names to lists that should never have existed.
At some point, we have to stop pretending we're witnessing isolated tragedies and admit we're watching a pattern the country has already decided it can live with. What keeps getting ignored is not the moment of the shooting, it's the aftermath. It's the shift that happens inside every parent who has to raise a child in a world where doing everything right still doesn't guarantee they come home. That is the part that forces you to rethink what safety even is, because safety is supposed to be something you earn through behavior, but our children are being taught that safety is something someone else gets to grant or deny based on how they felt, and that is where the real lesson sits. A black child can be walking, standing, shopping, leaving, running away, and none of it protects them from becoming a threat in someone else's imagination. The distance doesn't matter. The direction doesn't matter. The outcome doesn't matter. What matters is the explanation that follows, because the explanation is what the system protects. This is why internal governance matters. Because if we don't set our own standards for what counts as danger, what counts as innocence, what counts as accountability, then we are forced to live under standards that treat our children as exceptions to protection, and the system has already shown you its standard. It will call a fleeing child a threat. It will call a back-turned child a danger. It will call a dead child a misunderstanding, and it will do it with a straight face because it has never been required to answer to us. So the question becomes, what do we teach our own? What doctrine do we build inside our community that does not shift every time someone else decides to reinterpret our children's humanity? Because the state has made its position clear. It will always find a reason. It will always find a justification.
Man, listen. This verdict didn't just bend the rule. It rewrote the whole damn playbook. What they told the world is simple. Self-defense ain't a danger anymore. It's about whoever tells the better story afterwards. Because let's stop pretending. When you chase a child, you're not scared, you're in control. Fear freezes you. Fear backs you up. Fear makes you hesitate. But a 100-yard chase? That's privilege. I know I'm getting away with this because it's a little black boy I'm shooting at. Running after somebody running from you? You're not scared. You committed. You chose this fight. And the courts backed them up. They took the moment Cyrus ran, the moment the threat ended, and said, nah, we're going to judge this by whatever the shooter felt earlier. Earlier. Not now. Not the moment the trigger got pulled. Not the moment when the only thing in front of him was a child's back. They let the shooter drag his so-called fear into a moment where he was the one in control. This means fear isn't a reaction, it's a strategy. It's a new tool. Just say you were scared and suddenly the facts don't matter. Because if you can drag your fear from 5 minutes ago into a moment where you're the one doing the chasing, then fear ain't a reaction, it's a weapon. And exactly how far does that go? If fear from earlier counts, then what's the limit? What's the cutoff? What stops somebody from saying, well, I was scared yesterday, so that's why I shot him today? Because that's where this is heading. Not justice, permission. Permission to chase. Permission to escalate. Permission to turn a fleeing child into a threat because you said the magic words afterwards. I believed. And here's the part that makes me sick. They didn't even try to hide it. They told you straight up. We're not judging what happened. We're judging what he thought might have happened before. So what I'm hearing is this. If your fear can outrank reality, then reality don't matter. If your story can outrank evidence, then evidence don't matter. And if your imagination can outrank a child's right to flee, then that child don't matter. This wasn't a verdict, it was an audition. And the shooter nailed the lines. They let a story outrank a body. They let a feeling outrank a fact. They let the shooter's imagination outrank a black child's reality. This wasn't a verdict, it was a template. A step-by-step guide for the next person to do the same thing and walk away clean. Just say, I believe, and boom, you good. And that's why I'm pissed. It's not just the case, it's the message it sends. If the child is black, your fear is enough. And until the law starts protecting the killer's feelings over the victim's life, we're going to keep watching the same movie with different names in the title. Because the second you let irrational fear outrank reality, you didn't just bend the rule, you erased the whole damn point of having one.
So that's where we are. A child chased, a child running away, a child shot in the back, and a system that found a way to call that reasonable. And the question now isn't whether this was tragic, it's why the same outcome keeps getting justified. Because if the law can turn a fleeing child into a threat and a pursuer into a victim, then we're not talking about justice anymore. And that's what this panel is about to confront head-on. Is this a failure in one case, or is this the system working exactly the way it was built to work?
You cannot sit here and act confused about this case when the facts are not disputed or complicated. Because what we are looking at is a 14-year-old black child who was accused of stealing water. And the evidence showed he didn't steal anything, which means everything that followed began with a lie. Once he leaves, instead of the situation ending, two grown men chase him for over 100 yards. That is not debate. That is what was presented in court. And that chase ends with a gunshot and that child being hit in the back while running away. Not facing anyone, not attacking anyone, running away, shot in the back. Do not move past that, because that is the whole case. The law justifies deadly force only when there is an immediate threat. So explain to me how a child increasing distance trying to escape still qualifies as immediate danger in that moment. Explain how black retreat becomes other people's threat. The prosecution told that jury exactly what I'm saying. He was chased, he was fleeing, he was shot in the back, and he had not stolen anything. And those facts still were not enough for a guilty verdict. So, something replaced them. What replaced them was a claim that at some earlier point there may have been a weapon, a claim that the shooter believed there was danger. The same script we heard with Tamir Rice, with Walter Scott, with Anthony Hill, fear elevated above fact, a claim about fear that was not tied to the moment the trigger was pulled, but allowed to stretch until he was dead. And when you allow fear to move forward even after the physical threat is no longer in front of you, then you are no longer judging what happened, you are judging what somebody said they felt. And once that becomes enough, you can justify almost anything, because now the standard is not what was happening at the time. The standard is what can be argued about later. This is America in 2026. A black child can be running away and still be framed as dangerous enough to kill. And don't pretend race is not part of how that danger gets interpreted. This country has a long, documented history of black people being perceived as more threatening, more dangerous, more suspect, even when doing the same actions as others. Combining that history with a legal standard that allows perception to override physical reality, you create the exact conditions where this result becomes possible. That is what people are reacting to. People are reacting to recognition that when the facts and the verdict don't line up, something else is making the decision. And you don't need to be a lawyer to see that. You just need to be honest about what is right in front of you. Equal protection under the law changes depending on who needs protecting.
This situation, we already knew the tone, the angle, and the justification before anybody even opened their mouth. And that's the problem. The way the explanation arrives polished, practiced, and ready to make the unacceptable sound reasonable. That tells you the system isn't shocked, it's comfortable. And that is exactly why community infrastructure matters. Because if we don't build our own systems of safety, our own protocols, our own spaces where our children are not treated like threats, then we will keep watching the same cycle repeat. And I am done watching our people absorb the consequences of a system that refuses to change its behavior. One of the structures we need is a co-trained responder. Cities using these responders see 20 to 34% fewer violent escalations. Youth incidents drop even more. Programs like Cahoots in Eugene, Star in Denver, and Heart in Durham handle thousands of calls with no injuries, no arrests, no force. Proof that when you change the response, you change the outcome. That means a community safety worker trained in 3 things at once: calming people down, reading behavior correctly, and intervening without violence. Not police, not security, not armed civilians. Someone whose entire job is to stop a situation from turning into a confrontation. This chase would have stopped immediately. The adult and the child would have been separated. The real threat would have been assessed instead of the imagined one, and the misunderstanding would have been resolved without turning a child into a target. That child would be alive. Full stop. I am tired of watching our people get hit twice, first by the death, then by the justification. When you can predict the excuse before you hear it, that means the system isn't reacting, it's operating.
I'm gonna give it to you, Sugar Bear, straight. No chaser, no grease. And I'm talking straight to us. It ain't the case. It ain't the evidence. It ain't the timeline. It's how damn quiet we got. How fast we swallowed this. How fast we moved on. Like this ain't the same story we've been fighting for 100 years. I remember when something like this would hit and the whole block would say, hell no, something's wrong. Now, folks skip that part and go straight into, all right, how do we explain this one? And that's what's so sad to me. Because I remember Trayvon. I remember the hoodies. I remember the marches. I remember the whole country had to stop because we refused to let them look away. We didn't adjust. We erupted. We made noise. We made pressure. We made the whole world say his name. And don't forget Ferguson. People didn't fold. People didn't say, let's wait for the details. They said no. They shut the streets down for months. They forced investigations. They forced cameras. They forced the country to admit what it didn't want to see. That was us at full strength. That was us refusing to adjust. And now, we're acting like we forgot how to fight. And then there was George Floyd. Man, the whole world moved. 60 countries, millions in the streets. Policies changed. Departments changed. Charges filed. People didn't bend. They broke the silence. But now, a boy gets shot in the back and we're scrolling past it like it's the weather. Like it's routine. Like it's just another headline. That's not who we are. And that's not who we're supposed to be. Because once you start skipping past your own instinct, the one screaming, this ain't right, and jump straight into, well, let me see how this can make sense. You already halfway accepted it. You already bent. You already folded. And that's how wrong becomes normal. Because it makes it make sense. Because we stop fighting it. We stop pushing back. We start adjusting the murder like it's part of the forecast. If we not the ones fighting for our children, nobody else will. If we don't raise hell when they kill one of ours, they'll keep doing it. If we don't make no noise, they'll keep getting away with it. Because the second we get comfortable, the second we get quiet, the second we start adjusting, we're not just accepting the outcome. We're helping them build the next one. And I refuse to be a part of that. I'm not bending, I'm not folding, I'm not adjusting. Not to murder, not to excuses, not to this, not today, not ever.
What this case exposes is not confusion. When the law lets a person's earlier fear outweigh what is happening in the actual moment, the standard isn't objective anymore. It's adjustable, and adjustable standards always land on the same bodies. The Bureau of Justice Statistics shows Black Americans face homicide victimization at over 6 times the rate of white Americans. CDC data pushes that disparity to nearly 7 times. And national use of force data shows Black people disproportionately killed while unarmed. Every year, across every system that tracks it. And while people pretend this is complicated, the law itself is not. The legal standard for self-defense is written in plain English. Under Model Penal Code, Chasseur 3.A4, deadly force is justified only when it is immediately necessary to prevent unlawful force on the present occasion. Not earlier, not imagined, not dragged forward from a moment that already passed. The moment. That is the rule. So when a system keeps bending that rule, depending on who is running and who is holding the gun, you're not looking at justice. You're looking at a doctrine that protects interpretation over evidence. So here's what needs to happen. 1. Track outcomes, not explanations, because explanations are flexible. Outcomes aren't. 2. Focus on the moment force is used. If the threat isn't present, the justification isn't either. 3. Demand consistency. A rule that shifts by identity is not a rule. 4. Support accountability visibility. Organizations like the NAACP and ACLU continue to document disparities in policing, prosecution, and use of force outcomes, providing data that allows these patterns to be tracked over time. So here's the decision in front of you. Either this is a consistent legal standard, or it's a system that justifies outcomes after the fact. And here's the truth. If running away isn't enough to save you, then the decision wasn't made in the moment. It was made long before the trigger was pulled.